Hi, I'm Kat, and welcome to Kat's Coffee Talks. Today we have the fabulous Gina Freuen, my favorite potter, my favorite artist, really. Anyway, we are going to talk about her history as a ceramicist. She also does incredible works on paper and graphic design, which I'd like to talk about that a little bit too. But I'm going to read to you her bio, and that is pieces that I have gleaned from her 6-page resume off her website. Gina Freuen has spent 45 years working as an artist in the Pacific Northwest. Her work includes original drawings, graphic design, and one-of-a-kind ceramic pieces fired in gas, wood, and soda, and I just found out electric. Her resume is 6 pages long, so I'll just give you some highlights. Gina has been the recipient of the City of Spokane Arts Award as an individual artist, the Carol Duke of Excellence Award at the Pacific Northwest Arts Fair in Bellevue, Washington. She has been the recipient of the Washington State Artist Trust GAP grant. Her work has been in numerous publications, including the Northwest Designer Craftsman at 64 Whatcom Museum of History and Art in Bellingham, Washington, Lark's publication of 500 teapots, and the Contemporary Potter from Rockport Publishers. I think that's the one I have. Modernism and Beyond, Women Artists of the Pacific Northwest from Brunsman and Askew Publications, just to name a few. I mean, you have been highly published. Your work is all over the place. And
just means I've lived a long time.
Well,
and pushed.
You've been very prolific while you've been living too. And you've also taught. You've taught for how many years were you at Gonzaga?
20 years, maybe
20 years.
Maybe longer. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because there towards the end, I think I threw in an extra semester or two, but yeah. So yeah, it was great. Once my son was in high school, my youngest, boys don't really want mom around that much. And Terry Gabar called me and said, we need somebody to teach design and composition. Would you do it? And I went, yeah. He says, we just need someone for the semester.
I worked into 20 years.
20 years later. Yeah.
Didn't you go to Florence once or twice?
I taught for Gonzaga in Florence, on their campus in Florence, Italy, 2 summers. It was phenomenal. The first time was more amazing than the second time, but still amazing. Mm-hmm. And then I actually even got to go on a couple of things to Turkey through Gonzaga, which were pretty wonderful. I knew
that. That's where my granddaughter is right now playing basketball. She played for GU, so small world. Yeah, and when I was in Florence, I actually popped into that school there just to take a peek and see. It's so cool to see.
Well, there are 100 campuses in Florence, at least 100 campuses from all over the United States in Florence. And they're just building. You'd be walking right by them and you don't even know that that's, University of California or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. So I want to ask you, how did you get into clay?
We'll answer that question. Okay. I was not going to be an artist.
Painters. Yeah, you have a lot of painters in your family.
Yeah, I was not going to be an artist. I was going to be different. And I was going to go to college and be a music major or a PE major, one of the two. But at that University, Pacific Lutheran, where I was, they required an art major, a fine arts requirement. So I thought, I'm going to take it and get it over with. And I signed up for a class called Materials Design. And the professor had been brought in that year as what they call a visiting art professor. And he was internationally recognized printmaking professor named Keith Acapulco. He was wonderful. He was wonderful with our age level, and he grabbed our brains. And it was also during the Vietnam War, and he wanted us to actively be protesting and to become involved in our country in that respect. and we had, in a little Christian university, we had sit downs, where we all protested classes, and he helped lead. And he stayed for about 3 years there, 3 of my 4 years. But leading on to that fine arts class, to get to that class, I had to walk by the ceramics room. And I had never seen ceramics done before. And I was enthralled and thought, well, maybe I'll take one more art class. And I signed up for the ceramics class. And the professor was fresh, brand new out of college, a graduate school, and again was energized and not burned out yet. and I just loved it, and I never left. I took ceramics every single semester, and so I majored in drawing and minored in ceramics, and then went to graduate school teaching drawing, but when I got out of all the education, I had to make a living, and pottery was a more readily marketable product. So I went that direction, and I've stayed that direction. Yet I've always taught. At Gonzaga, I taught composition, design, and drawing. And when Terry Carr would go on sabbatical, I would teach his ceramics classes for him sometimes.
I have some of your drawings that I've purchased. Very reasonably priced, I must say.
Oh, yeah.
From some of your open studio sales. I just snatched them up. Some of them are framed. Actually, one's hanging right next to me, next to Shani Marchand's beautiful watercolor. Mm-hmm. And some are still in a flat file waiting to be framed, but there's not enough space right now. But they're just some of my favorite pieces. And of course, I've got, I think, a few pieces from every stage. You have some of your gas fired pieces, which I just love because of the colors and the satiny patina and all of that. And then your wood fired, but soda firing is something that I didn't know anything about. I've heard it, I've heard you talk about it, but I didn't really know what it was. So you use real baking soda.
So we'll go back over. We'll go over this wood fire, soda fire thing.
Please do.
My kiln, I built it about 30 years ago. And it was a kiln that had been taken down by some artists over in Seattle. They took it down because they lost their lease. And they put an ad out saying they wanted to sell it. And I knew the guys who had been using it, and I contacted them. And they put the kiln in pieces onto a U-Haul trailer and had a student drive it over to me, and I put it back together. Wow. And so it's a 40 cubic foot. It was a 40 cubic foot gas-fired car kiln, meaning that the floor of the kiln literally rolls out of the interior of the kiln, and you can stack it from all sides on that flat car bed, and then you can roll it back into the kiln to fire it.
Okay, I've seen pictures, and that's what that is. Okay.
Yeah, and so I fired that kiln up until about 2010 that way. And then my family life with my parents became complicated, and I'd been traveling to wood kilns, which is a 2-week process. I'm gone for 2 weeks usually to those wood kilns. And I couldn't be gone that long. So I thought, why can't I rebuild my gas kiln to wood soda fire? And so in 2010, I completely rebuilt the kiln. I got rid of the car part and put in a solid floor, and created 2 side openings of the kiln that I could put wood through and also put the soda through. And the first time I fired it, I glazed all the work. I put all the work in it, and I fired it all by myself, which was staying up for 36 hours. And it came really close to what I wanted. And I was I thought, well, this is going to work. Because my goal was basically to create a body of work that was similar to wood-fired, because I had really grown to love the wood-fired surface on my pots rather than the more colorful surfaces. The colorful surfaces, I knew exactly how they were going to turn out. And so for the first time in my life, 2000, I think I started wood firing in 1996. So I've actually been wood firing for, gosh, 20 years. And, but not all my work. But then for the first time in my life, I was able to put my work into a kiln and have the kiln give me back surprises and unintended gifts. And I used to say my least favorite became my favorite became my least favorite. Sometimes that would happen. And sometimes a kiln would save a piece, and sometimes a kiln would destroy a piece. And I was at a stage of my life where that was really good for me, to let loose of some of that control. So on my kiln, when I rebuilt it to wood fire, because I didn't want to travel as much to the big kilns, it's a shorter process. It takes us all day, takes us most of a day to load it. And I work pretty much, I've worked with Chris Kelsey, and the two of us have worked on this, firing this kiln, just because I need a helper, as far as, someone hand you the shelf, someone hand you the work, someone hand you the post, that kind of thing. So it makes the one person, what would have been a one person job, so much easier. And then he puts his work in the firings also. And Mark Moore puts his work in the firings. And in the last few firings, we've had Dennis Randall Smith has been putting his work in our firings, which has been wonderful. And so then we load the kiln, and I shut it, brick it all up, and then just put a low gas fire on it overnight, and then start kicking it into gear the next morning. And then by 7 o'clock at night, the kiln is about, usually about 5 o'clock at night, I start throwing wood in. And the wood in this case isn't to gain heat, it's to add frosting. It's just for added surface. It can add crystal, it can add carbon, it just makes the soda fired work closer to the wood fired look. And then at usually around 7 o'clock that night, we can start introducing the soda. And as the soda is basically baking and soda ash, which is one of the main ingredients in soap. And we introduce it by making a slurry of it and putting it on bamboo rods, and we slide those bamboo rods into the same ports we've been putting the wood in, and dump it in, and it combusts, and it floats through the kiln, and it lands on the pots, and that's the glaze.
Wow.
So depending upon how heavily the ash was, or how heavy this, depending upon where the location of the pot is, and whether there's something blocking it, or you'll get different surfaces on the pots. So they don't all look the same from one side to the next, And then we go through, once we've finished soda firing, we have to bring the kiln up to, it takes about an hour and a half to do the soda firing. Then it takes another hour or so to bring the temperature of the kiln up to where we want it, which is about 20, I'd like to come close to about 2,300 degrees. And then I usually ship Chris home as soon as we're done with the soda and say, I'll take it from here, because at this point I can check it, go take a nap with my timer on, come back and check it, go take a nap. And we go through a reduction cool all morning, till about 5 o'clock in the morning, where I shut it down. but I've been sleeping, looking, sleeping, looking, sleeping. About 4 or 5 days later, you get to open the doors and it's Christmas. Yeah.
Fabulous. I love that.
We just finished firing Chris's wood kiln, which is on my property. And it's the 5th firing. And just to show you, I think I've mentioned many times in my life that ceramics is considered to be one of the longest learning curves in all the arts. And Chris built his kiln on my property about 6 years ago. And he's fired it 5 times. And the first 4 times were all learning and no real results. And this firing, finally, all that learning came together, and the rebuilds and refitting, and this firing was beautiful.
Good.
So, and we're going to turn around and fire my kiln in 3 weeks. So we're going to have a whole bunch of work, coming out here pretty quick.
So you have Trackside Gallery downtown on Adams off of First, and you're going to have an exhibit there in May, or?
I'm the May exhibit. Every year, well, when I started working with Trackside, it was about 2015 or 16, somewhere in there, and I had been working with Art Spirit forever, and I just decided I wanted to do something locally, and went and visited with Chris and said, would you guys be interested in an exhibiting partner? And I'll do all the publicity. I'll do all your graphics. I'll do all your publicity. I just, would like to have a place downtown to show my work. And then I also the poor guys, I feel bad for them, because I said, what if we do this? 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 What if we do? So I started creating all these shows, and they've been really great because the shows do bring people in the door, and those people do wander into the back and they do buy the pots of Chris marks off the shelves and stuff. So like in every year we'll feature either Chris or Mark or myself alone. So last year we didn't do anybody because of COVID, but the year before it was Chris. And so this May it's me. Every April we feature a regional educator. And then in June now, in the last couple of years, it's been the Spokane Queer Art Walk. And we do citywide. And so we've got 8 queer artists, ceramic artists showing from the Montana all over area in May, June. And then September's always been an invitational show. And then now we started we really do actually do so much more than just our own work in there anymore, because we started that coaster show in November. That's the artists design coasters, bar coasters.
Yes, I remember,
Yeah, and we sell those for $20 each, and all the money goes to some nonprofit.
Awesome.
And that has been amazing. We've sold. So the first year we supported Meals on Wheels, and this year we supported I Embrace Washington, which is a foster children's organization.
Oh, wonderful.
And then we do our Cup of Joy, and that's our year. But and in that we fire my kiln, we fire his kiln. It's a family, though. It's pretty wonderful.
It is wonderful to have it here in Spokane. I'm a huge fan. So you used to have Inland Craft Warnings.
I did work with Inland Crafts. Mm-hmm.
And that was
for about 25 years. And I worked with, I actually began with the help of Bestsellers, Art Fest. And you know what's amazing to me about those events, Art Fest and Inland Crafts, is that some of those volunteers have always been there from day one. They volunteered and volunteered and volunteered. And I just, those people are just phenomenal to me. Because I like to run something, but I've never liked to volunteer for someone else that's running it.
Right.
So, so I run this, so when I quit doing inland crafts, I, and moved out here onto this property, I started a studio tour with the help of
That was my next question. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, with the help of Hulda Bridgman. And she and I came up, because we live close, we said, why don't we do a yearly studio tour? And Jill Smith was across the creek, and so we said, asked Jill if she wanted to join us. And Kay, my sister, lived close enough that she was part of it. And Patty Osbold lived close enough that she was part of it. Victoria Brace is part of it. And so we're in our 14th year this year, and it's really evolving because Hulda is no longer part of it, and Kay, I don't think, will be part of it this year. Shawnee Marchant will not be. So we're going to have a new slate of studios. We'll have Jill and myself, and then also Calista Bajani is going to open up her studio, and it's within the same distance as Kay was. And Victoria Brace will still be there. But some of those volunteers that I relied on through Art Fest and Inland Crafts, they're still my volunteers for this. It's just to make, yeah. There needs to be an award in this town for an arts volunteer, I think.
What a good idea. What a really good idea.
Because I have that here for I just kick right in there.
Think about that. For sure. So let's talk about your actual process of building your work. Do you use a potter's wheel? I know you do hand building and sculpting and pressing and molding and, I mean, sculptural pieces.
I do a lot more. Wheel throwing has become a bigger part of my work than it used to. I used to be almost all what we call slab building. And my studios have always been on the small side, so I've never had a lot of equipment, you know, like slab rollers and extruders, and because I've never had room for them, and have always just relied on rolling pins and a work table. So if you were to look at my studio, it's always kind of like underwhelming. I have people that know my work that look and say how much work I get done out of a little space. Because I started my career with an unfinished 10 by 10 foot bedroom. And then when I moved out onto this property, I had a 600 square foot studio, which was pretty wonderful.
Yeah.
And then about 3 years ago, I tore it down and rebuilt it so it was a working living studio. So my working space now is back to that unfinished bedroom I began in 40 years ago. I'm working out of a 10 by 12 foot space. And it's very efficient. I don't have a lot of stuff I'm holding on to because I think I might use it. If I don't think I can use it, I find a home for it because I don't have room to store it. And I've downsized my glaze buckets from 5-gallon glaze buckets to 2-gallon glaze buckets, you know. But it's the process of my work relies a little bit more on wheel throwing than it used to as part of the form. I mean, I don't know if you can see that piece over there, right there. So this was wheel thrown.
Okay.
And then everything else is hand built and put on it. And that little teapot right here, that's wheel thrown. That's wheel thrown. And these parts are wheel thrown. But I have other forms where this might be wheel thrown, but all the rest of it's slab built. For this, the wheel thrown might only go this far and the rest is slab built. So I do quite a few of them where it's half and half slab and half wheel throwing. But I think the transition to wheel throwing, it had more to do with a change in my surface that I was using. When my mother started needing more care, I had less blocks of time to work. And I started doing these cup forms that would take me not long to throw, and then I could store them and they could stay wet. And I could come in and I'd have an hour and I could carve on them. And then that carving started showing up on the bigger pieces.
Mhm.
And I can relate the carving a little bit to Harold Blades. I can remember him looking at me and saying, Gina, when are you going to start drawing on your pot? You draw all the time, why aren't you drawing on your pot? And so I guess this is a transition to that aspect.
Well,
My
I
work.
can totally see a relationship between your pottery and your drawings, especially in your more recent work, where
Yeah.
you're introducing birds and hands and different forms. And it's exciting. It really is. I just drool. I just drool.
Well, sometimes I think they're a little cute, and I do try and stay away from cute.
I don't think anything you do is cute. It's all got an edge to it. It's all got an edge to it. So, one final question. Other than, is there something else you wanted to like express about who you are and what you got going on? You have things coming up that you're excited about?
Well, I've slowed down. I don't get as much work done as I used to. I get better work done.
Yes.
I think it's better work.
Yes.
There just isn't as much of it. It's a slower, I'll look at it and I can't figure out what direction to go with it. And I'll cover it up or set it aside. And then since I can't sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning for some reason, I'll lay there and I'll think about those pieces and I'll resolve them. So I'm a much more thoughtful about this work than I used to be. And I've been trying to create pieces that are a collection of forms that go together instead of a singular form. And that's been kind of fun. So like a wall piece that holds the teapot and the cups and stuff, which again makes them really expensive because I can't put those pieces out there for, moderately priced, because the success of them there's a level of failure when you start creating complicated pieces. Is the teapot going to survive? Or the cup's going to survive? Is the wall piece going to survive? And when they all survive and it all goes together, you go, oh my gosh.
Well, they're rare in that way, but also with all of the time and effort that you put into just to get them fired, let alone
and there's loss attached. So the minute you go into wood firing and soda firing, you have loss attached to the pieces. And so the pieces that do survive and they survive with magic. They have an added value to them because they truly are one of a kind. I gave up control of surface, except I can control the clay. I can control how I stain it or how I create some line work, but oftentimes even the line work will disappear. So I gave up control of surface, and so when the magic happens because of the kiln, that's a one-of-a-kind magic that I can't completely take credit for, and then because of that, there's that added value to that piece. And for me the problem is that when people see that work, and I'm not standing there, that's why I love a studio tour, is actually explain why that piece is more special than that, because people say, I don't understand your pricing. And I go,
well, maybe this video will help them to understand, just have them watch this.
I said that piece, something happened on that piece that didn't happen on anything else, and it all just came together. And it was like the ceramic gods and gave me a
It is
gift.
magic, Gina.
It is.
Your work is magic. So where can people find your work is what I want to know.
Oh, well, I do have a website that has a shop on it. And from what I gather, people say my shop works really well. It does charge shipping, but if you're local, I will refund shipping. But or if we can do some sort of pickup. A lot of times pickups can happen at Trackside. So my work's down at Trackside Studio on Post or Adams Street. And then Art Spirit over in Coeur d'Alene. I'm part of two organizations, Washington Clay Arts and Northwest Designer Craftsman. And both of those organizations have yearly events, and I'll send work to those. But most of the time, those shows are over on the coast somewhere.
Yeah, fun. Now, your works on paper, are they also on your website?
They're not on my shop. I was actually thinking of doing a clothesline for my studio tour if the weather permits. But if the weather has to be good, and that's kind of late in the year. But
my work studio tour.
It's the last Saturday in September, the 24th, I think, or 5th.
This was wonderful to see you.
Well, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, it's.
I understand your mission behind it, and it's wonderful. And hopefully, those reasons will be less and less of an issue too. Yeah.
Right. I just can think of so many of my artists and musician friends, especially who I wish were still around, that I could ask them questions and share, their stories with everybody. And so it's just really just a labor of love. It usually takes a half an hour. It took a little longer. But yeah, it's just really fun to see you, Gina. And like I said, I would buy absolutely everything you ever made your whole life.
Well, it's going to be nice as we can start getting out again and going to the openings, which with vaccinations we should still be able to do safely with masks. We had an opening on Friday, and we felt safe, and
good.
It wasn't real crowded. And people were all masked and cooperating beautifully. And even though they'd say, I'm all vaccinated, and they were still standing there with their mask on, and that's important. So I think we're moving towards, there's a lot of negative news out there, but I do think we're moving towards a positive resolution of all of this yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, my dear. Well, thank you again, and thanks for tuning in, everyone. And I'll see you next week when I don't know who's going to be on. So stay in the loop. It'll be good, I promise.
They have to know how to do Zoom.
That's right.